Better future. What is that? What would you like to see in a better future, and how do we achieve that better future?
We are privileged this morning to have with us the country director for the International Labour Organization, and I'm delighted to introduce to you a wonderful lady who now heads Zimbabwe and Namibia. Please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, for Phililie Masuku.
It really is a pleasure for me to be here at the Better Future Summit with so many influential leaders and thinkers who are dedicated to building a sustainable and resilient economy. I'm also honored that we can come and discuss issues of decent work and economic growth, which is very central to the SDG8 and also is at the heart of the ILO's mandate. Now, I want to start by speaking about decent work. And maybe before we go there, just a thought. I was listening to some of the presentations, and we were talking about long-term savings. And yet we have the working poor. What are they saving? What are they saving if they're in the informal sector? They're exposed to so many decent work deficits. So it's going to be a struggle to get them to come and save. If they're not making anything, they're barely making it. So maybe I'd like to start by speaking about decent work, which is more than just creation of jobs. We want to make sure that it provides security, fair pay, and the ability for people to live dignified and fulfilling lives. So when we promote decent work, we lay the foundation for stable, inclusive economic growth. So we want economic growth that builds a bridge between social justice and the sustainable futures that we envision as Zimbabwe. So now, decent work we have a specific agenda called Decent Work Agenda, which has 4 pillars, which are very, very crucial to making sure that we do achieve the decent work that we're looking for. First, we're looking at employment creation. With employment creation, as ILO, what we try to do, we want to encourage job creation, particularly in sectors that have very high growth potential. For example, we speak of the agriculture industry, where we're trying to support better access to markets, we want to support financing, we want to support training, so that we can help transition workers from informal to the formal sector. Now, when we get into the formal sector, then we're able to allow our people to have access to better health, safe working conditions, and we also want the industry to be more sustainable. Now, by creating more and better jobs in sectors like these, we can then be able to reduce poverty and also empower our communities, especially in the rural areas where we have a majority of our people. Now, the second pillar that I want to speak to is the rights at work. Now, we want to ensure that there's fair labor rights in fostering a just society. Now, the ILO is also committed in upholding standards that protect workers from discrimination, and we also want to ensure there's equal pay for equal work, because we find in a lot of situations, we find that men earn more than women for the same work that they do. So we want to make sure that that is also balanced. Now, in Zimbabwe, where informal sector remains very prevalent, we know that achieving these rights at this scale is very complex, but is very essential as well. Now, the third pillar that I want to speak to is social protection. Social protection systems provide a buffer for individuals, so it enables them to be resilient and also allows for long-term planning. Now, workers who are secure in their ability to access healthcare, being able to save for retirement or receive unemployment benefits can contribute to a more stable and sustainable economy. So, for instance, if we look at countries with stronger protections, we also realize that they are better equipped to sustain worker welfare and economic resilience, especially in crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, I want to speak to the issue of social justice, social dialogue. With social dialogue, we understand that it's very important that we have our employers, we have our workers, we also have government coming together to engage collaboratively so that they're able to create balanced policies that make sure that they're able to address the needs of all stakeholders. Now, the ILO also contributes to support inclusive social dialogue processes and the strengthening of social partners' capacities to participate in social dialogue, especially on the transition from the informal to the formal, so that we are able to provide services to workers and also enterprises in the informal sector. I want to move on to maybe specifically, let's look at what are the key areas in the SDG8? Because SDG8 speaks to decent work as a major driver of inclusive economic growth. Now, there are 10 key areas, but I want to speak to 5, which are really focused on what we're trying to speak about today. It speaks about enhancing productivity through a focus on high value added and labor-intensive sectors. It also speaks to promoting decent job creation, entrepreneurship, and the formalization of our MSMEs. It also speaks to achieving full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men, including young people and persons with disabilities. And as I said earlier on, we want equal pay for equal work of equal value. No, we also speak to protecting labor rights and promoting safe and secure working environments for all workers, including migrant workers, and in particular women migrants, and those who are in precarious employment. And lastly, it also speaks to enhancing access to financial services. Now, as we frame this discussion, I'd like to speak on productivity growth. So, sustained productivity growth is the main driver of the development process, including employment and decent work creation, as well as the transition to the formal economy. I'll keep referring to the transition to formal economy because I want you to understand the importance of formalization, because a lot of things cannot be achieved if we're in the informal economy. So I think I'm advocating that we move to formalization, then we're able to start saving once we're in the formal economy. So as I said earlier on, we're working under we have a lot of our people being defined as the working poor. So what is the working poor? Now, the working poor are those persons that are employed whose income is insufficient to bring themselves and their dependents out of poverty. So it's like the rat race, you know. You're just earning enough just to keep your head above the water. So, and this is a result of the returns of our labor that are too low. And this is usually associated with low levels of productivity. So I'll give you an example, a case in point. I'm sure a majority of us have domestic workers. Some of us, we hire them to come in 3 times a week. So how do they sustain themselves if they're coming in for 2-3 hours a week or 3 times a week? So that's low productivity, because I'm sure they're willing to work more, but they cannot, and the money does not sustain them. So that is a category of those who are the working poor. And then we have the productive employment, which is defined as employment that yields sufficient returns of our labor. So it allows the worker and the dependents a level of consumption that's just a little above the poverty line. So clearly there's a deficit in the productive employment, which consists of those in the labor market who are unemployed and those which I've alluded to as the working poor. And then you have those who are actually productive. Then those make up the labor force. Now, in order to be decent, work has to be productive and also provide workers with adequate earnings. Isn't that right? So that is why promoting adequate earnings and productive work is a central element of our decent work agenda. Now, the decent work is an approach to pursue opportunities for women and men to obtain decent and productive work in conditions of freedom, conditions of equity, security, and human dignity at all levels, whether be it global, national, sectoral, or local. So we want to make sure that it creates more opportunity for decent work, and greater prosperity of these people allows them for wage growth for the workers. At the same time, more decent work contributes to a higher productivity. So obviously, if the work is decent, then you are able to produce more. And then it also enhances the worker's skills. It also motivates. It also gives a sense of safety and health and well-being. Now, while decent work agenda offers a clear framework, achieving these outcomes is very complex. So in Zimbabwe, we have key challenges such as the weak regulatory frameworks. We have limited access to education and training, and we have financial barriers that prevent businesses from formalizing. I know there's been a lot of debate with some people who say that a majority of the informal sector is not as high because people are registered, businesses are registered. But that is not what formalization is. I can register and still experience decent work deficits. What about the person selling their tomatoes on the street? If they have an accident, where are they compensated? Do they have access to health? So registration does not equal formalization. If you are formalized, then you're able to get the benefits of social protection. We talk about retirement. We talk about pay as you earn, All these require that you are registered and then we're able to extend those benefits to you. Now, we're trying to answer the question of what strategies can economic agents in Zimbabwe implement to promote formalization and financial inclusion that supports wider economic growth. Now, I want to go back to formalization. We need to understand what formalization is and why it is important for economic growth. Now, formalization is not just an objective in itself, but it's a necessary condition to reach very important objectives such as decent work, which I have alluded to. Now, without formalization, access to decent work is just an illusion. So transition to the formal economy entails comprehensive, country-tailored, gender-responsive, and non-discriminatory integrated strategies that will be able to tackle multiple drivers of informality. And as such, these strategies must be combined so that we're able to intervene in increasing the ability of the formal economy to provide for decent work opportunities. And we must also be able to absorb these workers in the informal sector so that we're then able to strengthen their ability and enterprises to enter into the formal economy. Now, this will require the right mix of incentives, and also we need to eliminate these obstacles that make it difficult to move into the formal economy. And we also realize that formalization is a necessary condition to increase productivity and sustainability, because there's no point getting into we're trying to grow, but then we're not able to sustain that growth. So the sustainability is very key to make sure that, we're able to then access decent work benefits. Now, we also want to advance decent work and workers' well-being. If you are formalized, government is able to have the financial means to expand so that they can address issues like structural development problems. And then we're able to reduce the poverty and the inequality that we are struggling with. We also see formalization that it leads to a greater equality amongst people. So the formalization of enterprises, including through increased productivity and better market access, contributes to the sustainability and also fosters fair competition in both our national and international markets. Now, more broadly, it benefits society as a whole because it also enhances the government scope of action by allowing increased public revenue, which we are all complaining about, and it also strengthens the rule of law. So if we're able to strengthen it, then it's easier to function under the rule of law. Now, we've also seen that in times of crisis, governments are better able to intervene if you are formalized, because they are now able to identify. And then in that way, I think an example, again, would be COVID-19, where we've seen governments intervening under the formal economy structure. And I'm sure we've been speaking about different SDGs. Formalization is also one of the conditions amongst a number of SDGs, SDG1, SDG5, SDG8, 10, and 17. Now, we are really struggling with decent work deficits in the informal economy. So, again, if you're formalized, we're able to reduce these deficits. So, for example, providing workers with basic social protection constitutes an enabling factor for their transition to formality. So it reduces their exposure to poverty, once again. It enhances their access to healthcare and also enables them to seize economic opportunities. So what strategies can be put in place to promote formalization and financial inclusion? So we need to set the right incentives, such as increasing benefits of becoming formal, and also eliminating these obstacles, such as excessive costs. People are struggling to register as well because it's too complex and it's too tedious. And then we also have legislation that is very complex. People are struggling to understand how to register. So we've also seen in recent years new technologies. And these have been increasingly used to foster transition to formality. So by contributing to simplifying and reducing costs of registration of enterprises and employment, it also helps to facilitates access to social security benefits, which I've alluded to, and also compliance with laws. And then this will obviously boost productivity, and it also will help to give a voice to those who are working in the shadows. Now, with digital tools, it can also provide remote access to training and support services for those that are in isolated areas. By leveraging technology, we can accelerate the formalization of informal businesses. We can also provide access to digital finance. I just got distracted there. Okay. To financial services and also deliver skills training to those who need it the most. What can financial services actually contribute to make sure that these people have access to financing? So our financial services would include our banks, credit unions, microfinance institutions. They're actually a potential conduit for promoting formalization of informal enterprises. So we also realize that products and services offered by financial institutions can promote formalization of enterprises in a variety of ways. And one example would be offering a payment system platform. So micro enterprises can actually upgrade their operations and process employees' payroll monthly so that we're transparent. And what we also realize is that a formal enterprise is more transparent and less risky as a borrower. So it also then reduces the operation costs and also helps to identify more accurately future earning opportunities. I'm going to sum it up because I'm sure I have 2.5 minutes. Now, what is key? What do we do now with all these things going on? The key is to have integrated policies. The ILO has what we call transition from the informal to the formal economy, which advocates for an integrated and comprehensive approach to formalization. So what is clear is that there's no silver bullet approach to this. And we're not going to succeed if we use a silver bullet approach. So there's 4 policy areas that we think can be integrated. First, hold on. We want to look at macroeconomic policies. They must be integrated to labor policies, regulatory and environmental policies, and also social protection policies. Now, as I end, I want to say that we can build not just jobs, but a future where work is dignified, it's secure, it's sustainable, In supporting decent work, we want to ensure that our economies are resilient and our societies are just and our futures are hopeful. So if we all agree that people need to be formalized, transitioned into the formal economy, then we can have savings. We can allow them to save. So I'm hoping that we're in this together and we can support it, advocate for formalization. Thank you very much.